owner of Once Upon a Time Bookstore. We're located in Montrose, California. And I just have a few little housekeeping items. Today or tonight, I guess, we're going to have an exciting exchange between, well, Holly and Sherry. But I do want to point out that we have books available and they're autographed. So if anyone is interested in that, please feel free to take a look on our website, which you probably already had the link to, but we do have signed books available um, as supplies last. So that's exciting. And also to make sure that we want to have folks engaged. So please have your questions in the chat and we will get to them as soon as we can. I see some hello Sherry's, can't wait, looking good. Of course, that's right. And there's still time to order a signed copy. So some people have already done so. So thank you very much for that. And so without any further ado, I would like to introduce you to Eye of the Music. This is a very special event for our store. And it's we are so delighted to have Holly Gleason, who's a music critic, a journalist, and an award-winning author of Women Walk the Line. She's going to moderate and talk to our friend who is always in blue, Sherry Rayn Barnett, who's just a trailblazing photographer that is known for all her live performances. Sherry, my favorite, Linda Ronstadt. But you do so many of them, unbelievable people. This is like a who's who of pop music, of culture, and from both coasts. So this is really an exciting time. I know that this book means a lot to you. It means a lot to so many other people. So I would love to hear you and Holly chit chat about your career and your photographs. So take it away there, friend Holly.
Thanks, Maureen. When Sherry reached out to me, was it about a year ago when you emailed me in the middle of the night?
Most things I do are in the middle of the night, so I'm not sure how long ago.
You said, I'm doing this crazy project. What do you think? I thought, what took you so long? And I knew whatever I was going to see was going to be amazing because you have a gift for looking at a moment, whether it's repose or it's blowing it up on stage and knowing the exact nanosecond to press down. And when I saw the book, it really was everything that I thought it would be. Or when you started sending me pictures, what when you were putting it together, what kinds of things were you looking to put in the book? And tell everybody about some of the artists that are in there, because you have some moments, buddy.
Well, as far as the artists that I was choosing to put in the book, obviously I needed to put in some popular artists so that people would buy the book and be attracted to it and know who, whose images I was going to have in the pages. But I really also wanted to include people who I felt needed to be honored and validated for their contributions to music as well, even though they may not have been, the major hit makers. They were either the people who had something to say, socially conscious songs to write and sing about, or some of the female musicians that never got their due, from the time when female musicians were considered more of a novelty, instead of legitimate musicians. And so those were some of the thoughts that I had as I was in, and I was uncovering photos as I went along. I'd be looking for a photograph of somebody, and I'd go, "Whoa, who's this on this proof sheet?" Or now I remember when I shot that, that there's more of this or more of so and so that I wanted to include. And so some of those people, I mean, the people that I included through both decades, several different times, are female pioneers, like in terms of their songwriting again or their performance, like Joni Mitchell and Linda Ronstadt, Tina Turner, Bonnie Raitt, and as well as starting with some of the folk singers like Peter, Paul and Mary and Buffy St. Marie, Judy Collins, Tom Paxton, some people who are lesser known. And then also in the female band department, it's like, we know the Go-Go's, and of course the Go-Go's are in there because they were the group that broke through, and had hit records. But before that, yeah.
And you, don't forget, you were there.
Yeah, so they're starting in, well, before I was shooting, actually, but in the 60s or late 60s, there were the first female rock groups. But by the 70s, two of those groups were signed, and one was Fanny on Warner Brothers, and also Bertha on ABC Dunhill, and who were lesser known, but just kick-ass players. I mean, they were amazing. They really, they honed their craft along the way, but they were already outstanding musicians, as opposed to the Go-Go's, who, when they got together, they came out of the punk scene. And the punk scene, you didn't have to play your instrument well. So they didn't. They learned as they went along. They didn't even know how to play their instruments when they first started, but they got good, and deserve a lot of respect. And I hope they get into the Rock Hall of Fame.
Well, I think one of the things about your pictures is you figured out how to capture the moment, like with the Go-Go's. Belinda Carlisle, she's dancing. It's an iconic picture. Everyone's seen it. They don't know that you took it, but they know that picture. But then when you're shooting Fanny, or you're shooting Peter, Paul and Mary Travers, they're very much full musical citizens, like flexing their craft. This isn't a bunch of girls going, "Hey, I'm pretty."
Right.
These are artists. Do you think, because I should have said this when we started, you're also not just a musician. I mean, the guitars give you away, but I remember being at the Palomino in the 80s, and you with your all-girl band, the Mustangs, not quite cowpunk, not quite mainstream country. And, you guys were musicians. When you were so young starting out, you still had that sense. Did the photography inform your musicianship, or did your musicianship drive your photography?
I would say the musicianship first, because I was, I was a little kid playing music. My mom was primarily a dancer, but she was kind of multitasking. She was a songwriter, and she practiced piano every day. So I heard music every day. And she was into early rock and roll. My dad was listening to opera, so it wasn't really an influence for me. It just wasn't my thing. But my mom was going to the Brill Building and trying to shop her songs and taking me with her. So it was kind of ingrained in me to have music in my life. And so as I was growing up, she made sure I had music lessons. And, that was before I, would hold a camera. So I'm just saying music kind of came first in that way. But also, interestingly enough, I went to school for music, but I was self-taught as a photographer. I wanted to capture the image that went with the music for me by photographing musicians. And, I have stopped playing at different times in my life, but I've never stopped shooting pictures. It just is how it went. And, but now, I mean, one thing I'm sure informs the other, but for me, there's, having the advantage of playing music, I can, when I'm shooting a performance, I can anticipate the moment. You know, I know when something, I know when to click the shutter, and that was something that was very intrinsic for me and fortunate for me. So I think that's helped. There's a rhythm to it.
Absolutely. And I think where you get people in that moment of, let's talk about Prince at the Roxy. I mean, that shot of him holding a mic, wearing his little bikini briefs, with a better Farrah Fawcett haircut than Farrah, but you got all that feral energy.
Yes, well, and it's funny because that picture has been it's gotten a lot of attention. It's Rolling Stones use it in their special Prince editions, and it gets used a lot. And it's interesting because technically it's not one of my best shots. It's blurry. It's not a great shot from that aspect, but it as you say, it captures a moment and a vibe and the personality and the emotion of his first performance in Los Angeles, which ironically, I mean, just a quick story about it was that I had a friend at the time who was a female comedian, and I did a lot of photographs for her. And so she hired me. She said, do you want to come? Can you come to the Roxy and photograph me? I'm going to be opening for this new artist. So I said, oh, sure. And so there I was to photograph her as a job. And there was Prince being the headliner that nobody really knew. I mean, some people did, obviously, because the house was full, and he had an R&B hit at the time, which I forget the name of.
I Want to Be Your Lover.
Thank you. Yes. And so you would know that. So, so we're hanging out in the back, up in the dressing room with him, in his little bikini briefs and taking pictures. And then he goes on stage and it's like, whoa. So, oh my God, it's crazy.
But it's also that idea of you knew when to get the juicy moment as opposed to the posturing for the camera moment.
Right. Yeah.
And that's one of the things I think throughout this book for anyone looking for Christmas presents, for anybody that loves Southern California rock or AOR from the 70s or the 80s, MTV people, this is the most unguarded, really drop the veil kind of picture of some of the biggest stars of the last, two generations after the Summer of Love.
Right.
You got everybody, and as they are as human beings, even being stars. Did you find that the artist played to you? Like when they would see you, obviously they got to know you. If they saw you with your camera, did you get extra attention?
I think it really depended on the situation because, as time went on, more and more photographers would show up at these shows, and when I first started, I was very fortunate because I was shooting shows that weren't as much of interest. I mean, a lot of the guys were going out and, good for them. They were photographing like Led Zeppelin and The Who and the Stones if they could. And that's where all the major focus was. And I was going, man, James Taylor, Carly Simon, everybody, Jimmy Webb, Joni Mitchell, Bonnie Raitt with her, she had a resonator guitar like this one playing at the Gaslight Cafe for like 50 people, and I was the only photographer there, so it was just remarkable and an opportunity that I didn't even realize that, looking back was so unique, so.
No, it really was. And I think, let's talk about New York and let's talk about one of the things you and I have in common. We were really young when we started doing that.
Yeah, I was in high school. I was going to the FAME school, the School of Performing Arts, and I was majoring in classical guitar. My best friend Jackie was a drama major, and we hung out. She was a radical. My mom was very radical, and so we'd go to concerts together, and as well as my mom and I would would, walk and march in anti-Vietnam marches and, all sorts of stuff like that. And my mom was very liberal with me. So I was going to school in Manhattan. And so I was already there. So it was like, oh, well, then I'll just go down to Greenwich Village, and no one was stopping me. Basically, no one was stopping me. My dad probably would have, but by then my parents had separated. So he didn't have the influence. He was a lawyer for the city of New York, bless him, but he was not he was not the creative influence in that respect. Fortunately, he had cameras at the house. That's what got, that was my, that sparked my fascination with photography. So, but yeah, so I was shooting in high school and just afterwards, and did a lot of the early work that during that time. It's crazy. I'd ride around on a bicycle in the streets of Manhattan with a backpack on my back with a camera. So crazy.
What did people say when you pulled up? Like, "Hi, I'm your photographer."
Well, it wasn't quite like that. Because what I did was I pursued, I tried to find out, well, who's publishing pictures of musicians, and at that time there was this range of underground papers that were starting out in New York City, particularly in the Village, West Village, Lower East Side, and so I got hooked up with one of them that said, okay, I mean, because, they paid basically nothing. So it didn't cost them anything to take me on. And, I showed them some pictures that I just shot on my own and that they liked. And so I got in the door, and then that gave me access to getting credentialed for various venues and concerts, the small clubs, the Gaslight Cafe, the Bitter End, the Village Gate, and then moving over to like the Fillmore East and larger places after that. But I certainly wasn't making a fortune. I was still shooting with one lens, so fortunately, if I was in a small venue in the Village, I didn't need more than one lens. That picture of Bonnie Raitt with her resonator guitar is shot like right this far from her, whereas later, as the venues got bigger and credentials were harder to get and, all that, you were kind of relegated to being further away, and you definitely needed to have a telephoto lens. And, even by the one time I shot Janice Joplin, that wasn't, it was pretty up close and personal, but still, I think I may have had another lens by then.
Well, but this also speaks to the truth of, if you're there capturing the artist at the top of their arc, whether you had one lens or not, it doesn't really matter. Sure,
Right.
those pictures are ridiculous. That picture of Bonnie with the resonator, it looks like an Italian Renaissance holy card. She's so beautiful.
Yeah.
That guitar could be the baby. And Christmas, right?
Yes.
And you frame it in such a way that it really almost looks like that. And I think people that I call them the nick of timers, the people who maybe knew Angel from Montgomery or Runaway, and then they showed up for Nick of Time.
Right.
They don't know how breathtaking Bonnie Raitt is. I mean, stunning. And the way you shoot her, you've captured that forever. Do you know when you're shooting, like, how really beautiful someone is, or are you just looking for there's the moment?
Oh yeah, no, and I always, even when people are emoting, to some degree, I really try and capture them in their beauty as well. It's in their essence. And like I'd never put out I'd never publish a picture of somebody looking horrible just because they were, having an emotive moment. I guess that's relative to the artist, but still,
But sometimes photo editors look at that grunting photo where someone's straining and like, oh, that's soul, because a photo editor, who's a photo editor, not a music photo editor, they don't have that nuance. When you see the picture of Janice Joplin
Mhm.
which is also jaw-dropping for all of you. Just books will be available shortly. Once upon a time, get in there, run Maureen down.
Run her down so she can buy more books because we're really running out.
Well, you know for sure she's got the books, but no,
Yes.
I mean, it's to see her almost. I'm from Shaker Heights, Ohio, and they have shaking Quakers. Those were the people that our city is named after, and they're rapture. You know, you see the renderings of them because that predates photos, but it's a rapturous kind of shaking, quaking going on. Almost, I hope this doesn't scandalize our viewers, almost like she's at the height of orgasm.
Well,
Yeah.
I
Is there
actually
something
have
you
a,
can tell us?
I do have a story about that, but I don't think I can ID the story. I just have to say that I remember, because the musicians I knew at the time, there was a female drummer who made, yeah, anyway, who would tell the story, told me, you know, that she would be playing and it was orgasmic. She would have an orgasm at the height of, you know, playing at some rock, you know, real rocked out tune.
Build, 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 build. Woo!
Yeah, exactly. I don't have that particular experience playing, or you know, but I can say there was one concert I'll share that it was particularly interesting to me because it was the Doobie Brothers. I know there's going to be a disappointment next to that, but it was the Doobie Brothers reunion concert at the Hollywood Bowl, and the Doobie Brothers have been known for having two drummers.
I was there for that
You know,
show.
and percussion, and so you know, very very powerful rhythm section. So I was, you know, I had access and I was moving around, you know, the bowl and finding different places to shoot. And there was I don't even know what song they were doing, but there was a place that I just got into, and suddenly I realized I had this experience that the rhythm of the song was exactly the rhythm of my heartbeat. And as a result, I was completely one with the music if I just stood in that one place. And
Wow.
it was something I'll never forget. You know, it just happened.
Do you have any pictures that capture that sensation? Are there any pictures that you took and you're just like, we're part of the flow?
No, because I wasn't as close to the stage as to you know, really capture it. It was just I was in motion. I was moving from one shooting area, you know, one place that I thought was a good place to shoot from, to another, and it stopped me in my tracks.
Wow.
You know? So, you know, you just never know.
And then the other thing that you do really well is you take pictures of people not just unguarded, but they're just completely at repose, and it's like you're not there.
Right.
You know, the picture, which I think you can throw up on the screen, it's the one I know you've got teed up, is Ike and Tina,
Right. Yep.
right?
Yep.
They're at the Chelsea Hotel,
Yep. The Rock and Roll Hotel.
and they're just they're killing time before the show. Go ahead and let people see it.
You see that?
Yeah. I mean, it's an amazing, like, you've got her being all zesty and shimmering and Nubian goddess, but that picture of them, just, that's what being suspended in space looks like when you're on the road. Right. And
Well,
that,
the interesting thing about that too is that when we got there, I was with the editor of the magazine. That was the first magazine this was my very first published shoot, first assignment. And it was for this long defunct underground newspaper in the West Village called Corpus. And Corpus was a magazine. They had offices over this theater, and the theater was running a play about Che Guevara, and the play was performed in the nude. So they got a lot of attention. They had a lot of success, and it funded this Corpus, you know, counterculture newspaper. So anyway, I get this assignment for Corpus to go with the editor, and we're in the Chelsea hotel with we wanted to interview Tina as well as Ike, but when we got there, Tina was fast asleep, and for 3/4 of the time I was there, she just was conked out, and finally woke up, and there they are. They're both really low key. She's looking at Corpus, and I think there's an amplifier behind them too. It looks like a Fender amp sitting in the room. You know, they just took the amp up to the room, and just
New
very,
York, you can't be too careful. But I mean, just look at how completely natural and at ease they are.
yeah,
It's like you're not even in the room.
right. Well, sometimes that's an important. Sometimes that's important. I've gotten some pictures of artists where they go, "Oh, I didn't even know you were there. Were you shooting?" You know, and because you don't want to be obtrusive. You don't want to get in anybody's face, you know. And then, of course, there are times that they're very aware that you're there, and they, as like you said, they play to you. Those aren't usually the photographs that I end up working with. Although there is one in the book, there's one of Sly Stone that I discovered while I was looking for pictures for the book that I had never really paid attention to, where he's just glaring right at me. You know, he was probably really high, but I thought, okay, that goes in the book.
Yeah, no doubt. So you're doing this, you're having this life, you're in high school. How is it after shooting this to
Yeah.
go back to geometry?
Well, you know, I was going to school for music. We only had it was the day was divided into half music classes and half academic classes. And you know, the focus wasn't as much on the academia. So I don't know. I just did it, you know. You had to go to school. So there I was, but then, you know, I'd run off, you know, on my own afterwards and do my thing.
Did they to when you went to school, did anybody either see your pictures as they were published or did they know? Because I mean, I know in college, the journalism professors, because I wasn't a journalism student, were very aware and very chappy about it. But then I would have professors I didn't even know come up and go, "Oh my God, your Neil Young piece, like
Oh wow. Wow.
you
Wow.
really got him to, open up." And you're like, do you teach something I can get a good grade in? That was always kind of my hustle. So were they aware that you had this other life and what was that like for you?
Not really. I was pretty quiet about it. And uh yeah, I was going to say something about that I forgot. But oh, I know what. But they must have I don't remember everything about it, but they must have known I was a photographer as well as there for, to play classical guitar because um I ended up being the photographer for the high school performing arts high school yearbook. So they used all my pictures for the actual yearbook, which was not um, which was not a normal thing, you know. And then even even for my own high school picture, I did a self portrait. I did a selfie.
Before there were selfies.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, like it would have to be hard to let someone else sort of take the lens. So what was the highlight for you of those New York years? Because you've got amazing pictures of Linda Ronstadt and some of the protest music and
Oh yeah. Well, at that point, I just and especially after I graduated, I was I was just like shooting every music thing that I could that I was personally passionate about, and then also making discoveries, of course. But I ended up, I did. There was a lot. It was a story, and it's a funny story that is not. I don't know that it's worth repeating right now, but I did not end up having a camera and going to Woodstock. But ironically, I did go to Woodstock for a day. I got kind of rained out. City girl got rained out, but I took my friend and I took an inflatable boat because we knew it was at White Lake instead of Woodstock, and I thought that was a great idea until we couldn't we had to blow the boat up along the way, because where were we going to blow the boat up once we got there? And then we dragged it along with all the thousands of kids that were, trying to, going to Mecca, and punched a hole in it. So we we ended up sleeping under the trees, listening to Joan Baez sing "We Shall Overcome." But I'd had my camera stolen right before then, so I had no camera, and I went home. So, but the irony is that I counted, and in my book, I actually have photographs of a dozen of the artists who actually performed at Woodstock. From John Sebastian, Richie Havens, Joplin, Grateful Dead, on and on. So, but to answer your question, I would just go where the music led me, where the music that I was listening to at the time. If somebody, James Taylor, went to see James Taylor, and he brings out Joni Mitchell,
Sure.
he has Carole King be his opening act just as Tapestry's being released, and she sings the songs from Tapestry for her opening slot, and he comes out and does "You've Got a Friend" with her. So, I ended up in the right place at the right time because of the music that I loved.
Right. And you can see it in the pictures. So if you had to have that most epic New York photo, New York moment, you can only have one, what would the picture be?
Well, I don't know how much it relates to New York, but it's from what I shot, is the shot that's in the book that I've kind of held back on before, of Janice Joplin.
That's
I mean,
one.
Janice was just killer. I mean, there are a lot of great performers, a lot of great female performers, not to say, we're talking Tina Turner and Cyndi Lauper, people like that who just command the stage. But Janice was in a world, in a class all to herself. And, I fortunately was able to shoot her when she was really on, and on in a good way. And, it was a couple of months before she died.
Yeah. So then you go to California.
Yes.
How did you get to California?
I hitchhiked.
And the thinking was, I've done all I can do in New York? Or?
No, you know what? I had a friend out here who was a studio singer who invited me, and said, come land on my doorstep if you want to come to California, and I'll make sure, you got a place and whole thing. And she was fantastic. And she had been touring like with Bread and with doing all these studio sessions and stuff. And so that was intriguing to me. But the other part of the equation was that when I was younger, I was listening to music like, I'd been so into folk music, but now it had gone into folk rock and country rock. And there were bands like Poco and Buffalo Springfield and the original Byrds. And I'm going, oh my God, I love this music, but it was all coming out of LA. Like all the folk musicians had moved to LA. Dylan had gone electric, all that whole thing at Newport. And I listened a lot. I loved, and I still do love, male-female harmonies. So, I loved Ian and Sylvia from the Canadian duo so much. I think my mom must have taken me to see them at Carnegie Hall, and I have an autographed album from that. And, but then I ended up photographing them just as they were moving into country rock. They had done an album in Nashville called Nashville. And, unfortunately, their audience didn't really follow their lead. They just kind of couldn't quite get what they were doing. But the point was, I was here. Most everybody had been moved to the West Coast, and then I actually remember, because I remember things in pictures. Like it's hard for me to read a book that doesn't have pictures. But maybe most of yours. But other than that, what I'm saying is like I'm just so drawn to the visual. I always have been, and I remember I was a fan of Jackie DeShannon, singer-songwriter, Put a Little Love in Your Heart, What the World Needs Now is Love, and she had an obscure album that I found in a record store called Laurel Canyon. And there's this picture of her on the cover with her fringed jacket, standing in front of her house in Laurel Canyon. And I went, wow, you could live in the city and have all this greenery around you and live in the hills and not be like just, basically smushed on the sidewalks every day, on the subways, to get around. And it was very appealing to me because even though I grew up in the city, I was always looking for something that was more of a natural environment. Not that LA it really is now, but we do still have the canyons. And, fortunately I live in a little pocket that you can walk and it's pretty and there are trees. And, because I was just kind of done with New York for that, I think. It was a little too much hustle and bustle for me.
So how old were you when you started hitchhiking?
19.
So you got to LA, you were still a young girl.
Yes, I was. Yes, I was. And, yeah, I stayed young for a long time.
Like, don't even. Because I think you got to be in New York when Black music was coming out of the Chitlin circuit,
Yep.
right? And it had a place like in the pop world.
Yeah.
And you got to LA as that whole second wave of the Southern California stuff was happening.
Yeah, it really was the second wave, and that's when I would start hanging out at the Troubadour, at the Troubadour and the Ash Grove, and those places were really and McCabe's guitar shop in Santa Monica. I mean, they were between the Ash Grove and McCabe's. We got to see roots artists. We got to see like Taj Mahal, the Chambers Brothers, and again Bonnie Raitt and Sippy Wallace, and really wonderful musicians that had been at their craft for decades. And that's another thing in my choice of people in the book. I wanted to showcase people who have really endured, like that have had different decades where they have been, popular, less popular, but they're still thriving. People like Judy Collins, for example. I left her out of the mix in New York. I mean, oh my God, this woman is amazing. She's, I think, in her early 80s now. I see her every chance I get. And fortunately, I got to photograph her just a few years ago. And, hearing her close her show with Amazing Grace, it's like you just levitate off the ground. She moved from being a folk singer to being, a contemporary pop singer to bringing these great songwriters songs to light, like Leonard Cohen and Joni Mitchell. And I mean, she's done so much and been an activist and having a great social conscience. But she sings at 80 something. She sings as strong as she did in the 60s. It's absolutely, she takes really good care of herself.
Her voice is remarkable.
Yeah.
And I think some of those artists, especially the women, I think they either did fewer drugs or they drank more water, but a lot of their voices have held up.
Well, Judy she almost lost it there. She's been very forthright about it. And she's written a book about her alcoholism and, cocaine use and all that. And she pulled out of it. But I did see her once where, oh my God, I thought she's losing it. She's singing off key. She's, and she got it together, man. She really did. So, and the ones who didn't, like Joplin, unfortunately aren't with us.
But she's in your book and she's gorgeous.
Yeah.
And then, you've also found a way when the next wave or next movement kind of laps across the ocean floor, you're on your surfboard. One of the things you and I've talked about, but I don't know that people realize, is you were shooting Toni Basil literally when she had one foot still in being a choreographer predominantly,
Right.
and one step being a chrysalis recording artist.
Right. Well,
and you were there for the whole Mickey thing.
Oh yeah. Well, that was kind of a magical fluke, where I got brought in, asked to come and shoot some basically production stills for what at that point were promo videos. And it was for Mickey because MTV wasn't happening yet. MTV wasn't on the air yet. It wasn't until, a little bit later, although Mickey, of course, was, a seminal video for MTV once there was an MTV. But Tony, Tony Basil is, man, she's a trip. And she also is an artist that really endures. I mean, she just re-recorded Mickey, and she's, teaches 60s go-go dancing on the internet now. She's a miracle. And but she, the first video, I shot stills for pretty much all her music videos, all of which were as creative as Mickey, but Mickey was the hit, and the whole cheerleader vibe and visual that everybody remembers, and they go, "Oh, you shot that," and Tony, because she was a choreographer, she choreographed it, she directed it, she did it as as a one-woman show with cheerleaders, and with real cheerleaders, and who knew what a phenomenon that would be, and how it would catapult her. Although now, she's still, she just choreographed Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and choreographed Leonardo DiCaprio. And, it's funny. I guess I can say this. I was, as I was putting the book together and I was letting her know what I was hoping to use from Mickey, I said, and maybe if you have something good to say about my work, because she's using, she's had, she's doing some T-shirts and Mickey T-shirts and stuff, and I said, maybe you could say something about, what I did for you, and how, something positive. And it took a long time. She said, well, I don't know, I've got to figure this out. And I said, really, it's just something very simple. And then she said, Sherry Rayn Barnett kicked ass on my Mickey videos. So I said, okay, perfect.
But you really did. I mean, those pictures, and again, I think most of the people watching are old enough to remember the assault of Mickey. But
the assault of Mickey, I love that. I will tell Tony that.
But that picture of her, totally cheered out.
Yeah.
That picture, I think, even if you didn't have MTV, was indelible. I saw people trick-or-treating because, again, you captured that moment of maximum energy, but also total control.
Right.
And that's a big deal, to be able to grab something that's not just a great picture, but it's iconic.
Let me, I think I can screen share that for you. I think.
Then anyone that's young enough to not remember, if you're out,
then they'll have to, yeah.
While you're looking, somebody wants to know, is there any, oh, there you go.
There you go.
I mean,
it was wild.
I remember those pictures.
Yeah. And then, I mean, I can just show you this too, but then she did some amazing videos. This was another one called Time After Time, and it was a whole different vibe,
I think you have to push back so we can see you.
Yeah. And you see it?
No, because
I got the screen share. I'm so sorry. Let's do this. You've seen that. This is it. So, and these videos are actually on YouTube. So if anybody wants to check them out, who's never seen them or never seen anything except Mickey.
Kind of cool. She's so sexy and beautiful.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's what you do. Somebody wants to know, is there anybody you wish you'd gotten to shoot that somehow you missed?
Yes. The Beatles.
That would be the one.
Yeah, I would say so. I loved the Beatles. I wasn't quite old enough to photograph them, or it wasn't a matter of access. I just, they came before my time. I've photographed the individual Beatles since then, the solo Beatles, post Beatles, in different environments, not anything major, just, a couple in concert, a couple, Ringo getting his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, things like that. But yeah, the Beatles, that's the first that comes to mind. I could probably make a list if I had my wits about me. But
you've shot just about everybody. I'm going to tee you up, take it to the hoop. You've got that amazing picture of Katie Lang with one of her influences.
Oh yeah.
Talk about getting that picture. That's an amazing moment.
Yes. Well, actually, yeah, Katie Lang and Roy Orbison, that was just such a remarkable opportunity to photograph them. I was the photographer for a television show called Top of the Pops in LA. And I'm looking for the picture for you. And it was a short-lived, I'm sure they didn't mean it to be, but there was some stuff behind the scenes that I didn't know anything about that shut down the production. But I was the photographer for the show, and they basically had any 80s, whoever was at the top of the charts for that
Right.
week. So I mean, it was God, it was incredible. I mean, it was David Bowie and Joe Cocker and Carlos Santana. I mean, so many artists, and I included some of them in the book. And then there, of course, it was, I mean, Roy Orbison and Katie Lang doing "Crying" together, with my friend John Jorgensen playing guitar for them, which was just such a treat. And here, I think I can show this to you all. And it's yeah, here we go. There they are. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's Katie with Roy, John in the middle, and then the portrait is just so really cute. I mean, it was great. I remember his sons were there at the taping, and yeah, I've got a color shot too.
And you just see so much connection between them. I mean, that's the other thing is when you look at her, she's so beautiful, she's so stunning. But then when they're together, she's a little girl meeting Santa Claus.
Yeah. Yes, that's a good point. That's a good way of saying it. And then just to change the subject here, but then I threw in the shot of Belinda because, I had her in 1981, I think it was, at the Greek Theater at the height of the Go-Go's We Got the Beat tour and all that. And then by the end of the 80s, she's a solo artist, and there she is. So, just getting the through the 80s there, but some of these, Carlos Santana, LL Cool J, Gloria Estefan, Joe Cocker with Clarence Clemens, the late great Natalie Cole, In Excess with Michael Hutchence, and some of these people, who knew that they weren't going to be around for very long. I mean, I would not have expected these people would have been gone so quickly after that. One of my major stories is about Nina Simone, who, I photographed at the Village Gate back in New York in like 71. I didn't know her or anything, but it was one of my best shoots from back then. And then through a friend of mine, musician friend who I'd been in a band with named Miriam Cutler, she was producing shows at the Vine Street Bar and Grill. And then she got hooked up with Verve Polygram, and they had her produce some jazz albums like Joe Williams and Marlena Shaw. I shot her album cover, and then Nina Simone. So I got to shoot this Nina Simone album cover, and photographing her, that's a whole other story. That was a whole other experience. But it was just one of the best shots I've ever done. And Nina apparently loved it enough that they used it for her, until she passed. But then also the addendum to the story is that I got a call from her manager or assistant in the early 90s or 93, maybe, I'm not sure. And he said, well, Nina would like to have you do a private session for her.
Wow.
So I figured she liked what I did. And they wanted something for a poster for the Olympia Opera House in Paris. So I went to her Hollywood apartment and did these photographs that also got used in her biography. And she was, comparatively, she was in a much better mood. Second, there are stories about, I'm not revealing anything. There are a lot of stories about the difficulty of the High Priestess, or Dr. Nina, as she was known by then, Dr. Nina Simone. But she was in a really, really good mood. And I said, so Dr. Nina, I said, you seem so happy. What's going on? And she says, I got the IRS off my back. So, there are just some memorable moments like that, that just were remarkable.
Do you having shot some of these artists over a period of time, I think of the Ronstadt, I think the Joni Mitchell, I think of Bonnie.
Yeah.
Do you think that how you shoot them, you learn how to shoot them better? Or do you think as the music evolves, you go to a place where you see them deeper or you see them in a richer way?
I don't think, I mean, there's no technical improvement. No, I mean, uh,
Only your
I don't think that, the very first pictures of Ronstadt, I don't think that from the first time I shot her till, 2 decades later, uh, I don't think that the newer pictures are better. I think they're just different. It was a different stage in her career, you know.
right.
So she looked different. The songs were different. The massiveness of the audience was different. Some of the later stuff, concert stuff I did, there are other people with those photographs, but the earlier stuff, no one else was there. So they're very unique and very rare in that way.
But also, I think, you don't give yourself enough credit. You find a way, even in those, we're going to put you at the soundboard, shoot. You still find a way to get some spark or some emotion or some little piece of their soul. We see humanity. When you shoot superstars, we still see humanity.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I would hope so. I mean, I feel, even though I'm not necessarily knowing the artist personally, um, I haven't talked to them beforehand, before their show or anything. I guess it's a connection to the music, the emotion behind the music, that it just, no pun intended, but it completes the picture for me. That's how I felt when I was a teenager. It's like, oh, that's what this person looks like I've been listening to on a record, or that's what, I wanted to not only see them in person, but I wanted to be able to hold on to the experience in a way that a record that was then more static, I don't know if it was more static, but a record was a different capture.
Oh, again, for people that don't remember life when you'd stare at that album cover for hours. That might be the only visual you had, especially if you like some of the kinds of artists we did.
Right.
Those images speak to the person that the songs made us believe they were. I think that's a fair way to say it.
Mhm.
And you've also been invited into the studio. Some of the pictures of Joni Mitchell, like, is that scary? How do you get pictures of Joni Mitchell in the studio and not be disruptive?
Well, that's a good question, and I mentioned it in the book. It was, I had a very sweet friend who was producing concerts like at the Ash Grove and different, smaller venues around LA. And she was friends with Henry Louis, who produced 13 of Joni's albums. And this girl, Jenny Bauman, was a big fan of mine and my work, and she'd try and get me hired for anything she could, which was great. And she had an invitation. I guess she had an open invitation from Henry for various sessions. So one of those sessions was a Joni Mitchell session. I didn't know what album it was going to be, but I'd already photographed her at the Central Park Music Festival. I had photographed her at Queens College back in New York with James Taylor when she came out for that show. And so here, of course, yeah, I'd love to come to the session. And I got there, it was at A&M Studios, and I just absolutely loved A&M Studios and A&M Records. And they just bought a book, which it's now Henson Studios, but they have one for the studio. And anyway, so I go in there, and it's very hushed. It's very quiet. It is not going to be a photo session by any means. And, I've got my camera in my bag. I didn't walk in, wearing a camera, or I might've been booted out. So then she goes into the studio to record, and John Guerin was on drums and Larry Carlton on guitar. I forget who on bass, but anyway, started recording, and it was just like, oh my God. Yeah, I didn't know what the song was. But I could feel it was going to be a historic moment, and nobody's documenting it. And uh, I literally, that was unusual. I literally sneaked my camera out and caught and shot just a few shots and put it away. And then it turned out the song she was recording was Cord and Spark. I mean, come on. It's just crazy. Crazy.
That's amazing.
Yeah. But, you know, and I usually remember my life in pictures, I have to say. But a few years ago, I'm going through some negatives and I go, oh, what are these? Joan Baez, because I had seen her at Carnegie Hall and I'd seen her at all the Peace, you know, Revival Sunday, Peace Sunday, all these shows. And I look and I go, oh, wow, oh, that's right. I was at a recording session. So I look at it. And of course, it's a Henry Louis session at A&M Studios. And she's recording Gracias a la Vida and conducting a mariachi band. So, of course, it's in the book. It's the publisher did a beautiful layout on the book, Stephen Booth, and he did. He made it a two-page spread of Joan conducting the mariachi band. I mean, it's just, you know, it was quite a find because I really didn't remember until I saw it.
Did you? I mean, and again, you've shot so many people. You've had such a career that you could only do 2 decades. I mean, 69 to 89, it's jam-packed. And for anybody to either live through it or love that music, this is the survey course. But you continue to shoot now. I mean, do you think that the door is open for 90 to 20?
Sure. Yeah, sure. You know, it's funny because originally we were going to go to 1999. It just seemed like, you know, that was a great year, you know, musically, you know, Prince. And I think you pointed it out actually. And, you know, as we started doing the book, oh, my poor publisher. I mean, we were trying to adhere to a deadline, but, you know, after a month, we're still in the 70s. It's like there was so much material. And we went, oh my God, we've got to get to the 80s, you know. And then we realized that the book had already gotten to be a lot larger than we had originally planned it to be. And it was like, oh, should we just do the 70s? No. I wanted to include the 80s because I also didn't want to make it look like I stopped shooting so long ago. And as I looked into the 90s, I have a lot of work from the 90s till now, but I also started shifting like in the late 80s is when I joined my band, the Mustangs, you know, country rock band, and, you know, where we played the Palomino. The first gig I ever did with them was, you know, opening for Lucinda Williams and Jim Lauderdale. And again, no pun intended, but my focus shifted. And so I started photographing country artists, and it didn't actually fit in the book. It wasn't making sense. So we stopped at 89. But at some point, yes, I would be happy to continue and do some more. I'd also, you know, there are people that, believe it or not, I left out of the 70s. I realized I left out Jerry Jeff Walker at the Gaslight Cafe. I mean, I was thinking like, oh, well, maybe these people aren't that popular anymore. They won't be recognizable. An old friend of mine, Buzzy Linhart, who just passed away. Buzzy, he was a friend. And, you know, I actually sang in the background chorus on his recording of Friends. You got to have friends.
I know. That's amazing.
Yeah, I hung out with him. He was quite the flirt, even though his wife was in the chorus too. That was Buzzy. He was a crazy dude.
Stop you.
Crazy dude. But I'd love to actually dig even a little deeper into the 70s, add some people, add some more photographs from, you know, some of the ones that only have one picture representing their contribution to the music of the 70s. So we'll see what happens. But meanwhile, there's a lot in this book.
One of the things I think that's really interesting, again, is you were so many places that for fans of music, you're going to be able to start with that Greenwich Village, Queen's College, that stuff, which was the beginning of singer-songwriter music, the protest stuff. Like I said, the place where the Chitlin Circuit turned into everybody's music, and you watch it all evolve in your pictures. And when you get out to California, the folk thing, the more rootsy thing that I think begat what we now know as Americana.
Absolutely.
And you have a lot of the rock and roll, and you have more punk than you think you do, and you have a lot of what the dawn of MTV began. You know,
Yeah.
you weren't necessarily worried about shooting the quote unquote stars. You
No.
were doing music that interested you, and you
Yes.
made it look interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. And I realized a few years back, however many that was, I realized, I mean, I'm kind of known, my work is known as rock photography, which it is largely, but I see myself way more as a music photographer. I mean, I was shooting, the jazz artists in the 70s. Oh, Manhattan Transfer. Oh my God, with Ella Fitzgerald. And being hired by their manager to shoot for the Grammy. They're uh, getting together for the Grammys, and then doing more work for them afterwards. It's like it's not rock and roll. It wasn't the big rock bands. And I loved shooting the iconic performers that the Bette Midlers, the Paul Simons, the anyway, Janice Ian, Bonnie Raitt, all the people we've been talking about that aren't bands necessarily. They're really iconic performers and personalities that continue to, contribute to our musical landscape even today.
Sure. So I think in some ways, you sort of set up what happened in the 90s, and as the 90s gave way to the 2000s, there was another profound shift. This is the foundation for all of that.
Hmm. Yeah.
And were you aware, did you see it evolving through your lens?
I just I followed the music. I followed the music. I followed the artists that I was inspired by, and artists that it inspired my own playing, contributed to that as well, and then just things artists that just elevated my own being, and so I don't know. I'm not quite sure how to totally answer that question.
Okay. Well, I mean, because given the amount of time you had to shoot a lot of these artists over the years,
Yeah.
I saw a lot of the evolution. Like it was like Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. Today, Sherry will tag Linda Ronstadt. We'll be back, and we got to watch some of these people grow up. We got to watch some of these people go through style shifts. We got to watch some of them go through musical shifts.
Right.
And we got to see them in a way that freezes that moment in their evolution. The picture of Lionel Richie with the afro,
Yeah.
right? Like
How about Stevie Wonder with his bow tie? I don't know if you noticed that.
like, no, I did. I thought that's right. But I mean, the thing about Lionel Richie is he so became that pop guy, right? Who was just so, but you've got him as a really proud Black man, really working the other side of the what does Ronnie Millsap say? The other side of the aisle, and I don't think people think about that. Lionel, they think of that's how Mr. Millsap would say it. They think of him as that smooth soul guy that all of our mothers played too loud in the car on the way to school. Right?
Right. Right.
And you have him, and he's so shining and gorgeous and just whoa, it's that peak moment. So you didn't see any of that. You just today the best you are in this moment.
Yeah, I think I'm probably too close to it to stand back and see it in the way that you do, which I really appreciate, because you put it's almost like you putting my photographs into words, which I love. I mean, you stun me with your, it's not just being eloquent. It's just you find these words that I go, yes, that's what it was, or that's what I was feeling, or that's what I was capturing, and in a way that most people don't have the ability to do. So I thank you for that. it's been great. Holly wrote the foreword for the book. She has been. I gave her a little dedication in the front that says she was the wind beneath my wings on this. I was so honored that she jumped on board so quickly and stayed along for the ride.
I think a lot of people have been waiting for this book for a very, very, very long time. We've been talking for over an hour. I
Yeah.
know people have things to do. I have one question from the house, and then, I think the question nobody, because everyone's so nice, wouldn't ask, but I think everybody wants to know what took you so long. And because and then the other question, which I think is a great question. So who do you want to shoot next? Are there baby acts that just set you on fire? Are there superstars that you think are so interesting right now? And they want you to name names.
Oh, they do they? Well, it's interesting. I've, in recent years, well, it's not even that recent, but I ended up shooting this fantastic festival that was highlight of my year for 7 years, called the Four Corners Folk Festival in Colorado. And this festival, it wasn't a folk festival. I mean, it was more aptly named a bluegrass festival, but then it was an eclectic music festival. It was acts from Canada, from Australia, from Nashville, from everybody from Delbert McClinton to Nickel Creek, Gillian Welch, David Rawlings, all these people that were brought together by this incredible vibe there. And interestingly enough, I got connected with them because I had done the first promotional pictures for Nickel Creek for Sugar Hill Records. And then I saw they were playing there, and it was like, I contacted the festival. I said, hey, I'd like to come by. I'd like to do this and that. And the guy says, well, I'm looking at your picture of Nickel Creek right now. Come on in, And then he hired me for the years after that. And so I got to shoot a lot of newer acts. And then in LA, and again, I'm more into now. I'm back to the smaller venues. I don't want to shoot I don't have any desire to shoot in large arenas. And I was very fortunate that in LA, there's a woman named Renee Bodie who was the director of a series called the Levitt Pavilion concert series here that had two venues, and she had me running back and forth. They produce like 100 concerts each summer. She had me running back and forth to both venues. I mean, everybody from ska bands to Los Lobos to Jimmy Webb and Judy Collins again to incredible groups that I wouldn't have been photographing otherwise. So I did that for several years until one of the venues closed. And that was fairly recent. And so now, who would I want to shoot? I mean, I love people now like, Casey Musgraves, or, I love their music. I don't know if that was, I don't go, oh, I have to photograph her, but that would be fun. Somebody asked me on the last live stream about this, and I didn't quite get it together to say exactly who I would like to photograph now. But, if it's a really large act, then they're playing, really large venues that I don't have as much interest in. I wish I'd photographed the Eagles, when they were the Eagles with their original members, but
which stage are the Eagles?
Well, I would like to photograph them when, just when Glenn Frey was around and when they were like in their, folk rock, country rock heyday,
So Bernie
Bernie Ledden, and that, and after that even, but the irony is the irony of that is that I did photograph a festival not a festival, but a concert that's in the book in Los Angeles in the early 70s that had like Chuck, that's where the Sly Stone, Chuck Berry, Stevie Wonder, the Bee Gees, all these people were on the bill. And when I was doing research for the book, getting some information about the concert, it was sponsored by K-Rock, and I looked I saw a poster for it that was reprinted, and it says the Eagles, and I'm thinking like, why didn't I photograph the Eagles? That's crazy. And then I read the story that the concert went on for 14 hours, and that the Eagles had in their contract that they wouldn't go on past a certain time at night. And so they never performed. there are a lot of crazy stories in the Naked City.
Rock and roll back in the day, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to work on that, work more on that answer, because I know there, I probably get off this and go, oh my God, I just love so and so. I wish I could, but I've never seen Springsteen live. And, by the time I knew of him, again, it was huge arenas. But obviously there's a performer. There's there's undeniable. So anyway.
So last question before we set you free.
Yeah.
Do you prefer shooting live to shooting either the offstage stuff or actual setup? Let's do some setups. Let's have a real photo session.
Right. I guess I'd have to say live, only because that's where my main comfort zone is. That's where I'm free to capture anything that is not going to be looked at with a fine tooth comb, or when you do a portrait session for an artist, everybody, not just artists, but we all know what we think we look like and how we look best, and we're very self-critical. And so there's a whole other layer that happens when you do a portrait session, especially for an established artist that is pretty, if they're not tightly controlling their image, they just have an idea of the best light, so to speak. But I've enjoyed the challenge of that. I've done album covers and I've done studio work, and but I really loved capturing people, more candid portraits. I seem to have a knack or an ability, a talent to capture people off stage as well. Just, the heart of the person and their personality. And they always love love what I've gotten of them, even when they're not paying attention. And that's what I love. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think being a musician, I think being a guitar player, that really feeds into the knowing when to press the button.
Yeah, it definitely
capture the moment.
Definitely does. It's funny, just wrap this up, but in my earlier days, I was in another band, and we I remember sitting backstage. We were opening for Jerry Garcia, like towards the end of his life, and it was up in Palo Alto. And I'm sitting there backstage, and he's tuning his guitar, and I'm tuning my guitar, and I'm thinking, and I know what a phenomenal moment this is, but it's like, I am not going to go get my camera. I am not going to interrupt this moment. There is no way. I had Dusty Springfield at my house one time she thought she wanted this band I was in to record a song with her. And it's like, I just wanted to take pictures of her in my living room, but it was inappropriate, So there were things that I thought were inappropriate that later on, though, I changed my tune about that. Like, the Mustangs, now Mustangs of the West, we went to, we played this huge festival in Denmark when we went to Europe. And, it was just full of huge artists. And then I guess we never knew who it was, canceled, and they got us on the bill. So we went on after Edie Brickell and before the Stray Cats. And you bet I was there with my camera. You bet I was photographing. So one of the pictures in the book is of the Stray Cats from the Roskilde Festival in Denmark, because the Mustangs were there. So I started taking pictures of like Lucinda because the Mustangs were on the bill. Things like that. I finally got hip to that and realized I was missing out on a lot.
But it also was that moment. Because we can't this is not a hostage taking situation, but I think without knowing, there was something so magical about the Palomino in the middle 80s.
Oh yeah.
We all knew this doesn't happen very often. Right.
It was a scene unto itself, and it drew so many different kinds of artists. From, Rick Nelson, Jerry Lee Lewis, Linda Ronstadt, Emmylou Harris, on and on and on. And, it also, like the Troubadour too, had different eras. It's like when I was introduced, Rusty Young from Poco is on our Mustangs of the West record label, and our fearless leader Kirk Passage, who is the head of the label, introduced me first to Rusty, and he said, "Hey, Rusty, this is Sherry Barnett. She was in the Mustang. She played at the Palomino. You played at the Palomino." And Rusty said, "I think different eras, different decades." And he, but he was absolutely right. He was absolutely right. There was a time for different people, and I even have, the Palomino is just barely represented in the book because I started shooting there, probably in the early 90s, Mary Chapin Carpenter, all these people who started playing at the Palomino as their first stop in LA. But the pictures that I have from the Palomino are from 1982, and they are Eric Burden, from the Animals, and Ronnie Blakely, who was part of Bob Dylan's Rolling Thunder tour. She had her own career. She, starred in Robert Altman's Nashville and got nominated for an Oscar. So I have both of them. They were together at the on the same bill at the Palomino. So it's an interesting shoot because nobody's seen those pictures before. So I'm just glad I represented the Palomino in the book somehow. And but you're right. It was quite a unique scene, Dwight Yoakam starting there, and on, the artists that came out of there, Rosie Flores, and, a lot of people that we did country festivals with. We did country festivals with Rosie and James Infeld and of course, Jim Lauderdale and Lucinda. So, so that was a different era. That's why it didn't quite fit in the book, but that's where my life kind of took me for a while. So.
Yeah. Well, again, for anybody that needs a Christmas present, anyone that loves music, anybody that's curious about the connections, and the beauty of what you did, Sherry, was you didn't just shine and gloss, you actually stripped back and showed the soul and the heart of these people.
Oh, thank you, Holly.
It's pretty incredible.
Thank you. And thank you, Maureen. And Once Upon a Time,
You're
because
welcome.
we wouldn't be here doing this without you and your not just support, but your enthusiasm is just like, you brim with enthusiasm for things and people that you love. And I've noticed that about you over the years. And this is just such a great connection to have. Maureen has Once Upon a Time. For those of you who don't know, she owns the very first children's book. Well, she wasn't there at the time, but it's the very first children's bookstore in the United States. And they do way more, obviously, than children's books. They do books like this and art books, and they are thriving, thank goodness, in this pandemic, because that's been a very, very difficult it's been very difficult for all independent bookstores, but they're figuring it out and they got it together, and I'm so proud of them.
Thank you. Well, thank you, everybody. Holly, oh my gosh, those questions were just fantastic. Everybody was just so excited. And Sherry, when you're blue, for all to see. And so, yeah, look at all those. That one red guitar. Oh my gosh. But
Wait, where? I took it out.
Okay, you took it out.
Yeah,
okay.
I added another blue.
Yeah. But thank you so much, everybody. Great Christmas gifts. They are signed. So we would be thrilled to have your order. Thank you both again so much. We appreciate it.
Our pleasure.
We loved it.
We really did.
Yeah, I know. This is fantastic. I haven't seen Holly in person for like 25 years or something. Because
Maybe.
From the Palomino days. I mean, we keep missing each other. We try and hook up, but something. Always something. But here we are.
Yeah. And it's a wonderful book, and I'm just glad to have been able to be part of it.
Thank you so much. And you are.
And that's it.
Okay.